Welcome everyone to our second FIRE author chat with author Josiah Zachary Nyangau. Dr. Nyangau is a recent PhD recipient from the Kent State University in Higher Educational Administration. He has just defended his dissertation focusing on faculty engagement in internationalization. His research interests include internationalization of higher education, education policy borrowing, and quality assurance in higher education. He is currently employed as a program coordinator in the Office of Accreditation Assessment and Learning in the Office of the Provost at Kent State University. And prior to coming to Kent State, he earned his Bachelor of Education from Kenyatta University in Nairobi, Kenya, and a Master's at Ohio University. Welcome, Dr. Nyangau, to the FIRE Author Chat. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Before we get started, I did want to share some information about your article and just tell our viewers a little bit about what you've been doing. Before any of the articles in FIRE were published, your article was one of the first to appear, and so it has been a sort of a tradition of ours among our editorial team to always track your article because it seems to always appear in the most popular papers list, and that's one of the reasons why we thought it was important to talk to you. And in fact, I just wanted to show our viewers that if you go to our FIRE website and you click on most popular papers, it always is in the top 10, and there it is as usual. Its normal place among the most popular ever. I also wanted to point out that there is a really broad readership for your paper. One of the good things about an open access journal is that there is an opportunity for people to read those articles that are open access from anywhere there's an internet connection. And it also means that in places that might not traditionally have subscriptions to more expensive journals, they can access the articles that are the most important to them. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that there is such a broad readership across the world, really, both in the developed and developing regions of the world, in both Kenya, where you would think there would be a special interest in your article on higher education as an instrument of economic growth, as well as in the US and in Europe and in Australia and all over Africa and Asia as well. So it's really exciting to see how much play and readership your article is getting. And I just wanted to also point out that your article has 7,539 total downloads since it was first published in February of 2014, which is almost 2,000 more downloads than the next highest downloaded paper in the FIRE library. So it's a really remarkable achievement. It says a lot about the quality of your work and about the importance of the topic, that it is continually one of those that appears at the top of the list. And then I wanted to show one more thing about the readership for your article. I was mentioning this to you, Dr. Nyangau, just a minute ago. If we look at your readership over time, it's been very steady the whole way through. You really, I mean, it kind of peaks, but your readership has really only picked up. But there is this, in November of 2015, you have a very high download count, which was exciting for us at the journal when we saw this, because it meant that you were getting a lot of readers right at that time, which with 922 downloads in 1 month, that's just phenomenal. But even in, May, let's see if I can get on May of 2017, which is, we're right at the end of May. I mean, that's kind of a low time for all of our articles, and you still have 110 downloads just this month. So kudos to you. And that's not just viewing the web page. That means that people are actually clicking and downloading a PDF of your article. So they're actually taking a look at it and reading it and citing it. So thank you for contributing that work to our journal and for really all the contributions that you're making in this area.
Thank you.
We talked about this a little bit before, Dr. Nyangau, but I'd like to ask you some just broad questions about the topic of your article and get some feedback from you about where you think this the research on higher education and economic growth not just in Kenya, but even more broadly is headed, and then ask you about what other work you're working on, and quite frankly, anything else that you would like to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first question I wanted to ask is, how did you specifically become interested in thinking about education as an instrument of economic growth in Kenya?
So Kenya has recently developed a long-term development blueprint called Vision 2030. And this blueprint is intended to transform the country into a middle-income economy by 2030. And in looking at that plan, I thought that one of the key or central missing planks in that overall strategy was higher education and the role that higher education plays in economic growth. And given the shift to a global knowledge economy, I thought that policymakers in Kenya at least have to realize that the quality of higher education, or rather the quality of the higher education system, as well as the training and development that it provides to its people, is really key to transitioning the country into a middle-income economy.
I think that's fascinating. You talked a little bit about the role of higher education and economic growth. Could you talk about that maybe a little more broadly?
Yeah, so there's really ample evidence out there to show that education in general, and particularly higher education, increases the human capital. So you're talking about the higher level skills, which is then necessary for innovation and increased productivity, which then drives economic growth. And investments in higher education, particularly research and development, really fuel innovation. And history is cluttered with countries that have, struggled with some of the problems that Kenya is facing today. And if you look at those countries, the one unmistakable strategy in each of those countries is that they all started with their higher education systems. So there were sustained investments in higher education that then led, and then if you look at the trajectory of those countries, you see that higher education was really the key driver of economic growth. And they've had extraordinary results driven by higher education.
That's fascinating. And was there something specific about the context in Kenya that makes higher education unique, or is that the wrong path? Or
so if you look at the rate of unemployment and underemployment among the youth in Kenya, it is really high. And when you in turn look at the state or the status of higher education, it is very disconcerting. As I indicated, that the problems are many, ranging from massification to budget cuts to crumbling infrastructure. And so in thinking about all of that, you have massification on the one hand and inadequate investments in education on the other hand. When you take all of that together, you realize that the prognosis for Kenya's competitiveness within the global economy is really bleak. And there is an urgent need for investments, systematic and sustained investments in higher education to spur innovation and increased productivity, which will then create employment opportunities for the young people.
Can I ask, this is not a question we talked about before, but just hearing you talk made me think of this. Is there, do you know if there is any problem with brain drain in Kenya for those who do attend higher ed? Are they staying in the country? Are they moving out?
So that is one of the problems that I've seen in the literature, that brain drain is a key issue. But also I indicate in the article that if you look at countries like China, they've struggled with similar issues, and they've made deliberate investments, intentional investments to bring back talent that is currently overseas. So Kenya could go through the same route by investing in a program that is intended to attract those foreign trained folks who are overseas, so that they can come back and work in their own country, try to develop their own country.
Yeah, that flow would be really interesting to track.
Mm-hmm.
You also talk about the contribution that policy borrowing and lending sort of make in changing higher education. How does policy borrowing influence economic growth in Kenya specifically?
So if you look at some of these countries that have had similar challenges as Kenya, if you look at China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and so forth, you realize that one of the goals in investing in education was to provide their citizens with the knowledge and skills to be productive in today's global knowledge economy. Mm-hmm. And so in borrowing some of the policies that these countries have used, Kenya actually has the benefit of learning from some of their mistakes. So I felt that they could leapfrog some of the policy mistakes, so to speak, and cut the tape and get to some of those things that can actually produce results. So if you look at research and development, for example, investments in research and development, that is one thing that we know that is absolutely essential. And so the UNESCO and the African Union both recommend for countries to invest at least 1% of their GDP in research and development. And if you look at Kenya, investments in research and development have been below 1% of GDP. And so there's need for that to be increased. We know that is something that works. And we also know that investments in research and development is really the foundation of innovation.
Wow, that's fascinating. You've started to talk a little bit about some policy lessons maybe for Kenya as well. Are there other policy lessons that could be taken from your work, or anything that you have noticed since the publication of your article that has been happening?
So, we've talked about research and development, and Kenya has this policy called the National Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy and Strategy. That is one example of the policies that has been borrowed, and not just Kenya, but many countries have similar policies. And those are policies that really guide investments in research and development. Again, as I indicated, Kenya is still below the resources that Kenya invests in research and development is still below what is recommended to produce the kinds of results that we've seen in countries such as China, Japan, India, Korea, and so forth. Another policy that I want to emphasize is that institutional diversification is really important. And so what we've seen over the last several years is universities taking over some of the mid-level colleges and turning those into satellite campuses. And the reason for that, as we indicated, is just the mass demand for higher education. So what you have then is a system that is burgeoning at the top, but is lacking in a vibrant network of mid-level colleges that will provide education to students whose terminal education will otherwise be high school. So I think it's important to really invest in mid-level colleges, for vocational training institutions. Those do exist today, but their role within the whole system is really unclear. So it is really important to again, realign that sector and make sure that it is indeed vibrant and contributing to the overall human capital for the country. The other policy I wanted to talk about is the creation of a standard framework for credit transfer and accumulation. I know that since the article came out, there has been movement in this area. I just read that the Minister for Education had made a pronouncement to fast-track the creation of a framework for credit transfer. So it remains to be seen how that will work out, but I think it's really critical that framework facilitates students' mobility within the system. a framework that is clear, intuitive, that is going to facilitate students' mobility within the system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
that's important. Yeah. I'm curious now what the takeaway is then from not just this research, but also some of these other factors you've been mentioning. When we were looking at the download information from before, I don't know if I showed our viewers, but we can actually see that the breakdown of downloads of your article by people who are working through universities, through government, through other organizations. And there's actually quite a large group that is downloading through government sites. So the takeaway is that these are probably government policymakers or analysts that are using your research as a foundation for the kinds of policies that they're making. So what do you hope the policymakers or higher education officials are taking away, or the World Bank or other development organizations?
I think that what is unmistakable from the article as well as from the literature out there is higher education is absolutely essential. It is one of the strategies that we must pay attention to if we're trying to grow the human capital. And that in today's global knowledge economy, someone else is writing the rules. And so for us to be able to play in today's global knowledge economy, it is important to really invest in higher education and be able to produce graduates who can compete effectively. Because what we have today, I don't think it's controversial to say that you have graduates who are coming out of the system who really do not have the skills that you will say make them competitive in an otherwise highly competitive global knowledge economy. So it is really important to step back, I believe, and really look at how to get from where we are right now to where we need to go. So I think that's really important. Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is linked to the whole point for the paper, is that research in investment and investment in research and development is really important. And there's need for increased intentional and forward-looking investments in research if we are to drive innovation and economic growth.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting to hear your perspective on this and your insight. And I think it's encouraging that so many people are taking a look at your work, because it means that maybe they're also investing in R&D and other things that would help drive economic growth through higher education. Can you tell, since you obviously are very popular with our readers, can you tell them a little bit about what you're working on now?
So as you mentioned, I just defended my dissertation, and I'm looking at faculty engagement in internationalization. So I have a couple pieces from my dissertation that I hope to send to press this fall. And so the first one is going to really look at, again, faculty engagement in internationalization. Why do faculty engage in these activities if they're not being rewarded within the tenure promotion system? Yeah. The other piece I'm really looking at is sort of the role of international organizations, so UNESCO, the Aga Khan, and so forth, the role of those organizations in higher education in Africa, and particularly in Kenya. So with regards to curriculum development. So that's what I'm looking at. And lastly, we are working on a special issue for FIRE. So we'll be putting out a call for manuscripts. That is coming out soon. So once we finish the call for manuscripts, I'll be more than happy to send it out, and we'll be hoping for a wide response. So we will try to distribute that as widely as we can, because we're looking forward to getting as many manuscript proposals as we can.
Well, it sounds exciting, and it sounds like you might have some challengers to your most downloaded spot once you get that special issue out too.
Thank you. That is an interesting challenge, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me and with our viewers, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes next, and hopefully seeing your name a lot more in FIRE and elsewhere in relation to not just higher education, but also comparative and international education more broadly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.